Hey everybody, it's Chuck Garfien. Welcome to the final podcast of 2024 as we celebrate the end of 2024 and look forward to 2025. And what better way to finish off the year, especially this year, than by hearing from you, my favorite people, White Sox fans, where you take over the podcast. Once again, you have delivered with many pressing, candid, thought-provoking topics and questions that you sent to me on Twitter. And among the topics, the many topics and questions, we've got realistic expectations for 2025. When will the pain end? And when will the White Sox be contenders again? We have questions about Chris Getz and Jerry Reinsdorf, trading Luis Robert Jr. and Andrew Benintendi, the White Sox prospect with the highest ceiling, starting rotation this season, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, men and women, 2024 was an all-timer. I promise you, one day you will tell your grandchildren about it. So what the bleep happened? What is happening now, and what is coming next? The White Sox podcast is here. Let the healing begin. Okay, before I get to your questions, and there were, about 100 of them. I'm not going to do 100 here on the podcast, but I think I've got the general sense of everything that you guys want me to talk about, and they'll all be covered here. But I first want to get to some, personal thoughts on 2024. This was a rough year in many, many ways for the team. 121 losses, all right? It also marked the end of NBC Sports Chicago. My longtime friend and colleague, Bill Melton, passed away December the 5th. And as we end a year, am I a reflective person? I am. And I look back on things that happened in my life as we look forward into the new calendar. And life brings ups and downs. There are twists and turns. There are wins and losses. And sometimes those wins and losses don't come on a baseball field. So I'm feeling loss. And if you've been listening to this podcast, we've been on this journey together. We're soon to be approaching the 1000th edition of this podcast, the 1000th episode. So a lot has happened during this time that we've been doing this podcast. To me, to you, and I appreciate all of you for listening, especially during these rough times for the White Sox, especially last season. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So it means a ton that during this time that you're still listening to this podcast and following along with what is going on with this team. And I mentioned wins and losses. I lost many colleagues and a former employer in NBC Sports Chicago, but there are also wins. And a win I'm seeing right now is what's happening at the Chicago Sports Network. And I know there is some loss because many of you who live in the Chicagoland area are unable to watch it because of distribution problems with Comcast. These things way out of my control. But I am very optimistic about CHSN, the broadcasts we have put together, the shows, and our show that will be coming in 2025 with the White Sox. And I'm very optimistic that there will be a deal done with Comcast in 2025, hopefully in the early part of 2025. Again, I am just a sportscaster, but I am feeling very good about the direction of this network and the people who work there, even while I feel the great loss of colleagues of mine who I had before. One of them is Ryan McGuffey. There's a question about Guff here on the podcast, so that is coming up. As for this White Sox team in 2024, they had a good team during the pandemic year, potentially great team. But if I was to describe the White Sox in 2024, this was a baseball pandemic. I mean, losing spread everywhere. everywhere. Find a way to lose. The White Sox would find that way. It was insane. And I am not going to go down the road of so many of these games. I want to keep you guys listening to the podcast. They lost so many stupid games in stupid ways that, see, it's all coming back to me now. Salty Chuck is coming up, and I'm trying to forget some of these losses. But I put this together. Like, this is the 2024 White Sox in a nutshell. And I'm going to go into it in further detail in the podcast with your questions. But like, this kind of sums up what happened. Losing spread everywhere. So did injuries. So in the first 2 weeks of the season, Eloy Jimenez, Yoan Moncada, and Luis Robert Jr. all got hurt, suffering borderline, if not complete, significant injuries, running to first base. Luis Robert Jr. technically got hurt rounding first base, but that just typified that team. And this was a team that could not afford not only bad seasons from those three guys, but injury-plagued seasons from those three guys. And it happened within 2 weeks. And they all three struggled on the field except for Moncada, who only lasted 2 weeks. He didn't start a game after the April 11th, and Yoan Moncada finished second on the team in WAR among position players. And he didn't start a game after April the 11th. That is your 2024 White Sox. What else happened in 2024? There's so much here. Pedro Grifol fired. Grady Sizemore named interim manager. Who could have predicted this? I mean, a year ago, could you have said, your interim manager is going to be Grady Sizemore? Will Venable hired. Cease traded. Crochet traded. Eloy Jimenez traded to Baltimore, signs a minor league deal with the Rays. If I could go back and speak to Chuck Garfien from 2020, this is where Eloy Jimenez's career was headed. Are you kidding me? When I drove Eloy Jimenez to Wrigley Field in 2019, and he then hit the game-winning home run against the Cubs, that by 2024, he would be not brought back. He'd be traded for basically nothing. And then he signs a minor league deal with the Rays. Didn't see that happening. The White Sox are exploring a new ballpark. A little more on that in the podcast. That happened in 2024. And yes, of course, they finished with the worst season in modern baseball history. My first podcast of 2024 came on January 2nd. It was entitled this: 2023 can GTFO, which if you are over the age of, 30, 40, 50, that means get the bleep out of here. Bring on 2024. I was so ready to bring on 2024 on January 2nd, and look what happened. By April 23rd, I had a feeling what was about to happen, because on April the 23rd, I did a podcast entitled, "Will this be the worst White Sox season ever?" And not only was it the worst White Sox season ever, it was arguably the worst season, period. Thank you, 1899 Cleveland Spiders, for going, I think it was 30 and 134, or 20 and 134. So with all that being said, let's get to your questions. And there were so many, so let's get to it. Big Daddy Q33 asks, my question is, what do the White Sox need to do for us fans to get behind them this year? For us to show up to games, for us not to post on Twitter to sell the team. We know they don't sign players and prospects just fizzle out. Campfire Milkshake can only do so much. Big Daddy Q33. Gene Lafitte asks, just answer why we should buy tickets this season. What are we paying for? Voss Daddy asks, what is your elevator pitch for a fan to invest in Chris Getz's vision and watch the team next year? Okay. My answer to those questions, and that, by the way, is a podcast. This is a podcast, but I'm going to give you a good sense of what I feel about those questions. The White Sox fan base is a show me fan base. Rate Field is not an amusement park like that other park on the north side. No offense to the Cubs, but like you have more than just baseball going on there. Let's be honest. White Sox fans want to see good baseball. They want to see winning baseball. And more than anything, they want to see a team that they can believe in. Okay. You want them to win, but at the core, at the very beginning, a team that you can believe in. There was nothing you could believe in from that team that we saw on the field last year. It was atrocious. And what I see Chris Getz trying to do is build something that has a strong core and has a strong foundation. There was no foundation, as we found out. I was led to believe, not that they were lying to me or us. I think we all, including the White Sox, were led to believe that there was something beyond just the stars on the team that we watched from the previous era. But now looking back, there was no core. There was no deeply rooted foundation with what was going on there. And there was no farm system that could support any kind of injuries or underperformance over a long period of time. 2021, that team actually had a lot of injuries, a ton. Robert, Jimenez. I mean, it was up and down the lineup. But at that point, the Sox did have some help in the minor leagues. They had some help with some of the moves they made with free agents or small acquisitions that helped keep that 21 team afloat. It lasted 1 year, one season. That is not something you can build a sustainable team around, and did not match the words of Rick Hahn that they wanted a team that it would have sustainable success. That is what Chris Getz, I believe, is building. Will he do it? Remains to be seen, but that's what I see him doing. So what gets me excited about this season? We're going to see a lot of prospects. You know how you want to, like, when the quarterback sucks, you want to see the backup quarterback? You want to see whatever is not what you're already seeing. You want to see something new. You are going to see a lot of new and a lot of exciting, potentially great new players coming up. Are all of them going to hit? No, probably not. But 6 of the Sox top 7 prospects, in my opinion, will likely get called up this season. Noah Schultz, Kyle Teal, Hagen Smith, Edgar Caro, Colson Montgomery. Jairo Uriarte was up for a little bit last season. He'll be here. Hagen Smith will be here. Mason Adams, Chase Meidroth, Wickelman Gonzalez, and my favorite, Riku Nishida. They're going to be on the major league team this year. I am looking forward to seeing them. Don't forget about Sean Burke, who was one of the Sox top prospects, had some injuries he was dealing with, came back healthy last year. 4 games in September. There's only 4 games. I know it was September. When he got called up, and he pitched great against the Guardians, the A's, Padres, Tigers, had a 1.42 ERA in 19 innings. We're going to see more from Ryan Ramos and Drew Thorpe. Also, the elephant in the room. Okay? Not that we saw much of them last season anyway, but there will be no Yoan Moncada. There will be no Eloy Jimenez, right? You'll see them on other teams. How much are they going to play? I'm very interested to see that. Very interested to see how that plays on a different with a different organization. But they will not be here. We're going to see a young and hungry team. And there's one word they keep saying. Will Venable kept saying it, or keeps saying it. So does Chris Getz. And he says the word accountability. So I'm going to hold these guys accountable for being accountable. And if we see accountability with this young and hungry team, I think that will lead to better baseball, more wins, more excitement. And I'll move on to the next question. So there are reasons to be excited to watch this team, but these are just my words. You need to see it, and they need to show it to you. Okay. Jack, will they lose 125? Sorry. Let me say that question more again. I'm a sportscaster. I can speak English every once in a while. Jack asks, will they lose 120 games in 2025? There we go. Well, listen, Jack, at the end of last season when they went 61 and 101, people were coming up to me and saying, like, what do you think about next year? And I kept saying this. I said, it cannot get any worse. Oh, did it get worse? I don't think they're going to lose 120 games. I really don't think they're going to lose 120 games, which leads me to the next question from Kyle Connolly. Chuck, you optimistically said that we would touch 70 wins last year. Now the line for this year is 49.5. Are you taking the over or the under? All right. So on the prediction podcast at the start of last season, I said I could see this team winning 60 games. I could see it winning 70. And I said, if everything goes right, and I mean everything, they could win 81 games. For me to say that about a team, that everything has to go right for them to win 81, we're talking about a pretty crappy team. So I did say that they would win 70 because I thought they were headed in the right direction. Because I thought that they would play better defense. I had just come from spring training. I watched them play much better defense, and I thought that was going to keep them in games. Guess what? I was so wrong. I was so wrong. That defense, I don't know what was worse, the defense or the offense. Whew, that's a tough one. But the defense was a disgrace. And Kyle, I have come here with some receipts. Not just my receipts, but the White Sox receipts defensively. All right, defensive runs saved. The Blue Jays, number one in baseball the last 2 years. Plus 102 were the Blue Jays last year. Guardians plus 89. Then it was the Dodgers plus 66. What were the White Sox? Grab a hold of that steering wheel, everybody, if you're driving in your car, because here it comes. The White Sox finished as a team, defensive runs saved, dead last, minus 87. Negative at every single position. Individually, Dominic Fletcher was plus 7. Jacob Amaya was plus 3. But you had Corey Lee minus 10. Nicky Lopez was minus 10. Paul DeYoung minus 11. Andrew Benintendi minus 13. So what did Chris Getz do? Well, the biggest thing he did, at least, you know what? The biggest thing he did to try to address this problem, and it's not just one thing that can be done to fix this problem, but it's a good start, is he signed Walter McKinven, stole him from the Brewers. He's going to be the bench coach, and he is a defensive positioning master. And I'm not saying he's the only one out there in the majors, but the White Sox didn't have this. And I was hearing from especially pitchers over the last few years about the White Sox defensive positioning that wasn't exactly helping out the pitching staff. Brewers, defensive runs saved. Last year, they finished fourth. They were plus 64. They were second in 2023 at plus 71. More on Walter McKinven and what he's going to do to help out this defense coming up. Oh, and by the way, the White Sox against the American League Central were 10-42. I'm taking the over on them winning more than 49.5 games because Walker is among many other people who are going to help raise that win total this year. Here we go. 2 questions in one. Southside boys, with it likely being another 100-loss season in 2025, how do we as fans benchmark success? While the turnaround was not going to happen overnight, the only glimpse of hope seems to be pray that the overhauled development sticks with this upcoming group of prospects. That's Southside boys. And then Debbie JC says, I don't know, Chuck. The Sox could improve 20 games and we'll still lose 100. How do we deal with this? Debbie, I feel your frustration. I feel your emotion. And I get it. And I live it. Okay. So what I would say to all of you is I would prepare for another 100-loss season. Just because, I mean, we're relying, and when I say we, the White Sox, you, fans, media, we're looking at a team that's going to be very, very young with some veterans sprinkled in and a lot of unknowns. A lot of unknowns. Players figuring out the game, and when they go up against better competition night after night after night, the better competition is going to win out. Expect to lose another 100 games. I would compare this upcoming season, so you have some kind of frame of reference. I would compare it to, and it's not apples to apples 100%, but pretty close. I would compare it to the 2018 White Sox that went 62-100. The rebuild had already begun. You had a general sense, or even more than a general sense, you had a large sense of what was coming from the minor leagues. That team had Jose Abreu. He had a down year. He was like the linchpin of that team. Only played 128 games, 22 homers, 78 RBIs. But in that season, you saw the future. Tim Anderson, Yoel Moncada, Lucas Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez, Michael Kopech. You also had Daniel Palka, Matt Davidson, Yolmer Sanchez, and Adam Engel. And as I reflect back on 2018, there was some fun in that season. And you didn't just look at the team, you were looking at the individual players, and you were trying to look into the future of what a White Sox team, a fun White Sox team, a winning White Sox team could be. That's what the 2018 White Sox season was to me. It was a rough year, but you saw light at the end of the tunnel. Right now, it is so tough for you to see the light. How could you see the light unless you're really diving into things like I am? But even with me, I got to see these guys play in the major leagues, and not just play in the major leagues, but consistently and get better and better and better. We thought we knew what Yoel Moncada was. We thought we knew what Eloy Jimenez was. We thought we knew what Tim Anderson was, et cetera, Andrew Vaughn. Okay, that's baseball sometimes. You don't know where things are going individually, team-wise, et cetera. But yeah, it's tough to see the light right now. But what I'd like to think is going to happen in 2025, you're going to see enough of these guys come up to the major leagues, or you're going to see more of them in the minor leagues, what they're doing, and you're going to start visualizing, oh, I see now on the field what they're doing. On the field what they're doing, and we'll have a better idea of what's coming. So from that question, we get to this one. You White Sox fans are very creative. That's what I love about you. Christian Bernardo. This is also its own podcast. But you know what? I don't think it's actually a podcast, because I'm going to answer this one pretty quickly. Who would win a 3-game series? Christian asks. Any iteration of the 2024 White Sox, or a team of some of our favorites? Who are some of Christian Bernardo's favorites? Well, this was the lineup that I believe he put together, or maybe she. Yolmer Sanchez, Daniel Palka. Yermin Mercedes, Nicky Delmonico. Adam Engel, Matt Davidson, AJ Pollock, Larry Garcia, Sebi Zavala. Role players from the previous era. Would a team of role players beat the best of whoever was on the 2024 White Sox in a 3-game series? And then he asked me to do the pitching staff. Okay. I'll give you the pitching staff in a moment. I'll also tell you who's going to win that 3-game series. But just to talk about the offense. Christian, any, and I mean any lineup from the past 100 years would beat last year's lineup. That team scored 507 runs. The next closest team in the majors in runs scored was the Rays, with 604, almost 100 more than last year's team. The 2018 White Sox had 656 runs. That was 24. So as bad as the 2018 White Sox were, they scored 150 more runs than last year's team. How about that? You wanted me to pick up pitching staff? All right, I went with this. My starters: James Shields, Dylan Covey, Carlos Rodon, Lucas Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez. Those were some of the starters, some of the best starters of that era. But for the bullpen, I wanted to get fun. I wanted to get creative. And it's not going to matter, because this team that I put together is going to just crush last year's team. Here's my bullpen. Ready? Some dramatic pause. Zez. Here we are. Jake Petrishka is in my bullpen. I got Albuquerque. I've got Anthony Swarzak. Juan Minaya, come on down. Give me Bruce Rondon, Tiago Vieira, Jace Fry, Manny Banuelos. And in long relief, one of my all-time faves, I even have his jersey, which I will one day give to a White Sox fan. In long relief, Odrisamer Despaigne. So there we have it. There is the team that I put together, and they would beat last year's team in a clean sweep. Moving on, we got Sam Pasiga. He asks, when will the pain end? Doug Wolf. What is the plan to get the White Sox in contention? Will it be 1 year? 5 years? Will they field a team this year that doesn't lose 100 games? That seems to be the overlying question, the consistent question and thought process of everybody. Will they lose or will they not lose 100 games? The way I look at this here is this. I mean, we are seeing Chris Getz and company acquire talent, acquire players, lots of prospects, and then sprinkle in the roster with 1 year guys, mostly veterans, and then they're not going to be a part of the future. The future is the young players. They need to figure out who they have. They need to figure out what they have. Let these prospects develop in the minor leagues and the major leagues. How long is that going to take? So I have it this way. Tough to predict one season, let alone three. But this is how I kind of see it playing out. All right, 2025, 100-loss season. I mean, unless something drastically happens and we are pleasantly surprised, they're going to lose 100 games. Maybe they lose 90, and that would be a great success considering they lost 121 last season. You improved by 30 games. So that would be amazing. Lose 90. But let's just be realistic, or forget about the number. Rough season on the field for the White Sox. They're not making the playoffs. 2026, you want to see this team get close to 500. Play competitive baseball, be close to a winning team. That's what you want to see. Will it happen? I don't know. I'm now looking into a whole season of development that I don't know what's going to happen and what moves they can or cannot make in the offseason next year. And then in 2027, let's fricking go for it. Let's spend some money. They're not going to spend this offseason as we're seeing. Believe it or not, talk about losses because they spent so poorly going into last season. And this was stuff that happened prior to Chris Getz. I'm not deflecting blame. I'm just letting you know the situation that the White Sox were in. Who had the highest payroll of any team in the American League Central last year? The White Sox. It was like $120 million payroll for a team that lost 120 games. So they're not spending much this year, I'll tell you that. They will spend again. How they spend the money, how much they spend, that's a whole other podcast, but that will help decide what the White Sox can do. Okay. We've got not just one question from Section 108. We've got two questions from Section 108. Aloha, Mr. Hand has this question. He goes, my question is simple. Why should we, as fans, believe anything this team says? The chairman told us this would be a quick turnaround, and Getz has said it's a rebuild. That is aloha, Mr. Hand. All right. Let's see how I'm going to answer this, because there's a lot to that question, and I understand it. Okay? So I'm going to go back to what Jerry said. Jerry Reinsdorf met with reporters after the 2023 season. He fired Rick and Kenny, hired Chris Getz. And what he said, among many other things that day, and I've got it here, he said, if I were a fan, I'd be pissed. I'd be very angry. He said, since I'm older, I feel more of a sense of urgency. He said, I don't want to go through a long rebuild. So Jerry wanted what looked like a quick turnaround. Chris is saying it's a rebuild. So maybe something has changed since that meeting with reporters where what's, is it going to be quick? Is it going to be a rebuild? What is it going to be? And then it comes down to this and, what is a quick turnaround, right? Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? I certainly did not expect last year's team, the first year under Chris Getz, after what was said in that press conference, for them to lose 121 games. But as I believe, and I don't want to speak for Chris, but as I'm looking at the moves he has made and things that I know about this organization, there were problems everywhere. On the field, off the field, in the dugout. You uncover one thing, you uncover something else, and it was just stuff coming out of everywhere. There were problems everywhere that needed to be addressed, needed to be fixed, and maybe, and this is just me theorizing, maybe Chris Getz found a lot more things that need to be fixed than he realized, and Jerry Reinsdorf realized. The messaging could probably be better because, aloha, Mr. Han. You see the separate messages right there. Quick turnaround, and now we're looking at a long rebuild. But how long of a rebuild is it? I don't know. They haven't given us that answer. So some things that I've noticed is, they got to replace Moncada. Moncada was a part of their plans. Even that he was going to get paid a lot of money, but you assumed he'd be good by now. No, he's gone. Jimenez gone. Tia gone. Robert came off one of the worst seasons in baseball last year. Your best player had one of the worst seasons in baseball last year, considering like the gap between what he should be and what he was. If you could rely on them, if Chris Getz could have relied on them, they could have built a team around them. You can't do that. So now you need a third baseman, you need a shortstop for TA, and hopefully it's Colson Montgomery. Maybe it's Colson Montgomery, or maybe he's the third baseman. I don't know. You need a DH. If you trade Robert, you need a center fielder. Those are humongous holes. And in your farm system, there was no one there ready to replace any of those guys. If it were me, I would have kept Crochet. I would have kept Cease. I would have extended them, and I would have built around them. But then I would have looked to my left. Actually, I would be looking down. I would have looked down into the farm system and said, wait a minute, we have no hitting down there. Where am I going to get hitting anytime soon? Not down there. All right. Crochet traded. Cease, I think they tried to trade Cease for hitting, but the best prospects they could get in return were pitchers. That didn't work out so well from a hitting standpoint. You got Sammy Zavala. We'll see what becomes of him. So this farm system couldn't support injuries or underperformance, and a lot of problems there. Chris spent the first year fixing some of the biggest holes in the organization. Manager, Will Venable from the Rangers. International scouting. David Keller came from the Mets. He's in charge of that right now. So why are the White Sox in such a state? Other than Luis Robert and Jose Abreu, what international signings have hit in the last decade for the White Sox? And those were like, big time prospects. What international players from the Dominican Republic, from Venezuela, have been like under rocks, so to speak, theoretically, like needles in the haystack that other teams can find? Who have the White Sox found? You cannot build a sustainable winning team just from the draft, from free agency, and trades. It might work for a little bit. You might hit big in some places like the draft, like Crochet, but they have not helped themselves there. So he's worked on that, Chris Getz. Marco Patti gone. Game planning. Walker McKinven from the Brewers. He is going to be huge for this team because he was huge for the Brewers. Here's what people in Milwaukee are saying about Walker McKinven. He'll be the bench coach. He was the run prevention coordinator for the Brewers. The casual fan's like, what the F is that? Well, here we go. I'm quoting here. Walker McKinven was instrumental in identifying and implementing successful pitch usage and tweaks for countless Brewers pitchers. He worked with catchers on techniques and mechanical adjustments to improve their receiving. He played a big role in the defensive transformations of Omar Narvaez and William Contreras. And when a pitcher successfully transformed his pitch mix and how he attacked hitters after landing in Milwaukee, McKinven was a big part of that success. That's a big addition for the White Sox. Long story short, aloha, Mr. Hand. The White Sox had and still have a lot of things that need to be fixed. Things are really broken, maybe more than what Jerry realized. And Jerry said this in that press conference. He goes, we owe our fans and ourselves to not waste any time. We want to get better as fast as we possibly can. Chris knows who the good people are, who the medium people are, and who the bad people are. So he's going to be able to step in and start running right away. Would it have been better if they brought in someone with more GM experience? Definitely an argument for that. 100%. Chris was in the farm system, and people are always saying, well, he didn't develop anybody. Yes, and that's a whole other podcast. But what was he given? What kind of players was he given? I don't know. See, I just went down the path of just a whole other topic, and I got so many of these other questions to get to. But I have talked about this on other podcasts. Anyway, am I answering your question? Aloha, Mr. Hand. I hope I am. I mean, what was the question again? Why should we believe anything this team says? You know what? They got to go out and prove it. They got to go out and prove it. These are words. These are players. They had a terrible year, worst season ever. So go back to what I said originally. This is a show me fan base. The White Sox need to show you that you should believe in them. So far, they haven't shown that to you. But like myself and like you guys at Section 108, you guys are dialed in with this franchise. I think you're starting to see, I don't want to speak for you. I'll speak for myself. I'm starting to see what they're trying to do. This is phase one or phase two of a multi-phase rebuild. Okay. This is from Beef Loaf. Beef Loaf, Section 108, also known as Mr. Delicious. He asks, do you consider yourself and Ryan McGuffey rivals now that you are doing White Sox podcasts on different networks? Mr. Delicious, I see what you're doing here. You're trying to cause a rift between me and my good friend Guff. How dare you? How dare you? We are not rivals. We are great friends, and there is plenty of space in the White Sox podcast universe. I have frankly have had to say goodbye to many of my podcast partners who are all dear friends of mine. Dan Hayes, Guff, Vinny Duber, Chris Kampka. We had Maddie Lee for like a week before she took a job with the Sun Times. I have a question for you, Mr. Delicious. You three have all been able to stay together for all these years. I admire that. Don't take that for granted. Don't take that for granted. So here's a question for you guys. What would happen if Mr. Delicious left the pod? Or Chirizi E? Or My Sox Summer? Who would you replace them with? What would happen to the Section 108 podcast? That's what I want to know. I want to hear an answer from you guys. Put you guys on the spot. And Guff's got a great podcast. I'm happy for him. Okay, ownership questions. You guys are coming with all sorts of questions for me, putting me on the spot. Greg Sharp Comedy asks, actually, I'm putting two questions together, two together. It's kind of the same thing. The sale of the team rumblings aren't going away, and all indications are that the chairman is prepping for the sale of the team. So the questions are when and to whom. Gnome 89, what is the latest on Jerry selling the team and the new stadium? Some big off-the-field rumors this year. There would be a huge impact on the franchise. There have been a lot of reports out there. This is well documented. I do not have any inside information on this, but all I can do is connect the dots. Jerry's 88. He'll be 89 in February. The lease at Rate Field, it is now called Rate Field because guaranteed rate doesn't exist anymore. It's not called Rate. That is up after the 2029 season. So there are some big decisions to be made about the park, about maybe developing a new ballpark in the South Loop. And you want this team to be healthy, in my opinion, when and if you want to sell it. And if you want to start or you want to build a new stadium, they got to break ground relatively soon to be ready, for the lease is up at 2029. I guess you can extend it past that if need be. They have tried for public money. That did not go over well. Here's my take on a new stadium for the White Sox in that South Loop location that I've been to, and it is breathtaking. It is amazing. And why I think, again, John Q. Sportscaster thinks, a ballpark in the South Loop for the White Sox is better for the city than, say, a Bears stadium anywhere. Because how many games do the Bears play in this new proposed football stadium? 8, 10, 12 concerts. Okay, add 10 of those. With a baseball park, you have 81 games. 81 games just for baseball in general. And what they are proposing is not just a ballpark, but a neighborhood where there are restaurants, bars, hotels, housing, and that is tax revenue for the city. This is not me delivering a message to say that the city should pay, taxpayers should pay for this. I believe the Sox are going to have to get private money to make this happen. But what I'm just trying to say is I'm just looking at your two proposed ideas, what they can bring to a city, and more could be done with a baseball stadium. I think that is a better blueprint for the city and us as White Sox fans, White Sox media. So that's my take on that. They want to build a neighborhood and not just a stadium. And we'll see if it happens. I don't know what's going to happen if they're going to try and sell the team. I don't know. But Al Cara asks, have you started hunting for houses in Nashville yet? I am not. I'm here in Chicago. I'm not going anywhere. Neither the White Sox. They're not going anywhere. Are we recording? I guess we are recording. I really hope that there's not a time in the future when the White Sox move to Nashville and I'm on camera saying they're not moving to Nashville. I would be absolutely 100% shocked if that happened. 100% shocked. I would be 5,000% shocked if they moved to Nashville. So, Sox fans, take that brain cell that has Nashville and the White Sox out of your head. It's just wasted emotion, wasted thought. If it, for some freaking reason, happens, and I do not see it happening, it just doesn't make any sense. Any sense. No matter if Jerry sells the team, and why would someone want to move the team to Nashville? No. Make it work here in Chicago. We're the Chicago freaking White Sox. We're not going anywhere. So don't even think about that. Enjoy your life. Don't be thinking about this team moving to Nashville. Wasted energy, wasted emotion. Don't do it to yourself. Don't fall victim to that. And Al, my question for you is, have you started house hunting in Nashville? Are you moving there? I'm not. All right. Joey Donuts. Hold on, I got to take a drink. I've been talking for 46 minutes. All right. We got a bunch left here, too. Okay, Joey Donuts. If you could wave a magic wand and pick any one of our prospects to reach their full projected ceiling, who would it be? This is the guy for me to answer that question. Like Hagen Smith, I think, has probably the highest ceiling of them all. Like he could be an ace. But how long have the White Sox been looking for a right fielder? 20 years? I mean, since Jermaine died, has there been anyone that they can really rely on? Adam Eaton was over there for about a year. Avi Garcia had some flashes, but no, it's been ugly. So I'm going Braden Montgomery. He's got, on paper, the whole package. Switch hitter, great makeup, great arm. This guy has an arm. I cannot wait to see him throw. I mean, he pitched a little. He threw 97 miles per hour on the mound at Texas A&M and Stanford. So Braden Montgomery, that is the guy who has the highest ceiling for me, Joey Donuts. White Sox 34. Will the blue chip prospects like Colson Montgomery, Teal, and Caro actually be given a real shot to break camp with the team in 25, or is this just lip service from Getz? I can hear the what's the word I'm looking for? The testiness from you, White Sox 34. The lip service. I hear you. I hear your tone. I think they will have a real shot to break camp, but this is what I think is going to happen. I mean, they're going to be given an opportunity to break camp, but I think the plan would be this. Matt Thaiss is a veteran backup catcher acquired from the Cubs. He worked with Drew Butera with the Angels. He'll be in tandem with Corey Lee to start the season. That's how I see it. And then you'll have Teal and Caro start in AAA, and they'll both get opportunities to come to the majors and play in 2025. As for Colson, that's interesting. That is interesting. They have Jacob Amaya, Lenine Sosa, Brooks Baldwin. Braden Shoemaker is still on the 40-man roster. I could see the White Sox bringing in a veteran shortstop, and that could be the starting shortstop on opening day. Lenine Sosa played really great in the Winter League at last check in Venezuela. He was battling like close to 400. Colson will go to spring training with a chance to break with the team. I don't know. Let's just see. I don't know. I don't want to sit here and say, yeah, he's going to break with the team. He's going to be given that opportunity to do that. But he will be in the majors in 2025. I'd be shocked if he wasn't. And then David Gilmartin. His question for me is this. Who do you think makes it to the bigs first, Caro or Teal? All right. Well, Caro, if you just compare these two, very interesting. Caro is 21. Teal is 22. Caro played 26 games in AAA last year. He slashed 295, 382, 463. Teal played 28 games in AAA. 14 games in September to close the season. He slashed 375, 516, 542. I think they're a dead heat coming in. And we'll see how they work with pitchers, and they're going to be working a lot with pitchers during spring training. So they're going to get a great education, and these coaches are going to get a great education watching these guys play to see who's ready for the majors. And then when they go to AAA, whoever is doing the best will get called up at some point. Dead heat between those two. Nick Parisi. I'm just reading what these guys say. Whatever you're saying, I'm just going to read it verbatim. Here's Nick. I was so pissed off at the White Sox organization when they up and traded Cease right before last season. And, well, we know how last season went. Will the White Sox have a starting rotation that will compete in 2025 that we can get excited about? Well, Nick, the answer is yes. So it's going to start with, as it looks like right now, Jonathan Cannon, who looked really good last season. Drew Thorpe, Sean Burke, Bryce Wilson, Davis Martin, Kai Bush. Those are probably the top 6, as I see it right now, for starters. Eventually, Hagen Smith will be called up. And I'd like to think Noah Schultz will be called up as well. And I see them signing another starter or two. There's still a lot of starting pitching free agents out there, like a Chris Flexen, say. I want to talk a little about Schultz. If you haven't noticed, or you didn't know it at the time, I'm just going to let you visualize this. You know how tall Noah Schultz is? He is 6'9". 6'9" and pitching. In 61 innings in Double-A last season, he had a 1.48 ERA, 73 strikeouts, and 17 walks. There's some real good hitting in Double-A, and he dominated. The one thing, though, is he only pitched 88 innings last season. So how many is he going to pitch this season? We're going to go through the whole Garrett Crochet formula again. Like, what could he possibly do to build up his innings. Say it's going to be 120 innings. You can find a way to get him into the majors. If he's dominating like that in AA, he's got to make the majors this year. Got to. Is he only throwing 4 innings a game? Okay, that could be the case. 5 innings a game. All right. Are they trying to win? Sort of. Are you trying to get Noah Schultz in the best position to succeed, learn how to pitch in the majors, and be an ace? Yes. Get him in the majors. Get him some experience in this rebuilding year. So I see Schultz and Smith a part of this rotation, and that means 2 out of every 5 games I get to watch these guys. I'm watching that. I'm excited about that. So there's my answer. All right, Milo. Chances Luis Robert Jr. is on the opening day roster. Again, these are all separate podcasts, and I'm putting it all into one as we close the year. And he wants to know who's the opening day starter. I don't know who the opening day starter is going to be. Jonathan Cannon? Drew Thorpe? X? I don't know who it's going to be. So at the winter meetings, there was a lot of teams interested in Robert. His trade value, however, is at its lowest. So the White Sox have to ask themselves this question and answer it. The question is this: do you believe that Robert will stay healthy for the first half and have a good enough year to get his trade value back to where it was, and then you trade something, you trade him and you get something really big in return? Do you take that risk? Because there is a risk involved in that. Or do you trade him now, this offseason, and get much less in return? Or do you hope and pray that there's a team this offseason willing to take their own risk by giving up a big name prospect in return for Luis Robert Jr., who, let's be honest, has had a checkered career in terms of health, and after what happened last year, underperformance. The White Sox need impact bats in return, no doubt. I think because of the Crochet trade, they've got a better idea of what they have and what they still need offensively. Benintendi, okay, we'll get to that in a minute. But they need a future left fielder. If they trade Robert, they need a future center fielder. They need a second baseman. We don't know about Andrew Vaughn. They might need a future first baseman. You know what? And if it's me, I'm preparing for a future first baseman, because what are we going to get from Andrew Vaughn for the future? You got to be smart. If you get one of those players, impact prospects / players for one of those positions in a trade for Luis Robert Jr., I think you do it. If you don't get that, and you're just getting, this guy might be good, that guy's all right, I'm not making the trade. I'm at that point risking, if you want to call it that, having Luis Robert Jr. on this team opening day, and let's go get the most out of him. And then you try to flip him at the deadline and get something much more for him. That's what I think is going to happen. So I'm putting it at 50-50. He's on the team opening day. But are they looking to trade him? Yes. As I take a sip of water. All right. Ike Gordon. Chances of Andrew Benintendi having a decent first half that someone's willing to bite and trade for him and his contract. Okay, so there have already been teams interested in acquiring Andrew Benintendi, believe it or not, at the deadline and this offseason, I can tell you that, and taking his contract. But what does that do? It affects the package in return. I mean, yeah, the White Sox, I guess, yeah, they'd be fine shedding money, but more than anything, they need players. And if they're not getting the players back in return, then you're not just going to say, oh, yeah, you can take Andrew Benintendi and the money and I'll get your crappy player in return. No, they need players in return. He's due to make $17 million each of the next 2 seasons, $15 million in 2027. He did slug .502 in the second half with an OPS of .830. However, he's also, or at least certainly was last year, a defensive liability. So you got to weigh those two things together. I don't know if he's going to get traded or if he will, but if he has a good first half, I think that could happen. Again, if the White Sox can get good prospects for Andrew Benintendi and that contract, they'll trade him. But I mean, the payroll for next season, really low, really low. They can afford to have Andrew Benintendi and his $17 million on that payroll. But again, give me prospects, give me bats, the best you can find. And if they can do it for Benintendi and his contract, they're going to do it. All right, we got two more questions. Marnie Gilmore. Thank you, Marnie. Why did the White Sox keep Ethan Katz and Marcus Thames after a historically bad season for both offense and pitching? Okay, this is an obvious question. I'll get to hitting second. I'll do pitching first. All right, Ethan Katz. If you're going to say, oh, look how bad the pitching staff was, and it was bad in terms of results, you got to give Ethan Katz credit. Like, you want to give him credit for Garrett Crochet? You should. You want to give him credit for Jonathan Cannon? How about give him credit for Eric Fetty? Yeah, Eric Fetty found his way in Korea, came to the White Sox, had a great first half with Ethan Katz. He gets traded to St. Louis, and he was not very good in St. Louis. He was much better with the White Sox. I think they tried to get Kopech to not rely so much on his fastball. He started to not do that before the deadline, pitched better, went to the Dodgers, did what he was supposed to do, and we saw what happened to Kopech. I'm not blaming Katz for Kopech's struggles with the White Sox. They also traded away Dylan Cease and Giolito and Lopez and Lynn. That didn't help Ethan Katz. What hurt Ethan Katz, I'll just say it from a general sense, way too many walks. This team had so many walks, more than any team in the majors by far. That's on him. I would go another season with Ethan Katz at least. I don't have a problem. I mean, how do I put it this way? Of all the problems the White Sox have, or certainly had last year, Ethan Katz was not in the top 10. Trust me. I would be keeping Ethan Katz. Marcus Thames was the White Sox third hitting coach in the previous 3 seasons. So that would mean if you replaced if you replaced Marcus Thames, the White Sox would have their 4th hitting coach in 4 seasons. My question for you, for all of you, and specifically for Marnie, what was the bigger problem last year? The hitting coach or the hitters? I would argue the hitters all had bad seasons. There's only so much that a hitting coach could do. If I could find the greatest hitting coach of all time and put him on last year's team, they lose, I don't even know how many games. I don't even put a number out there. It's still a bad offense. They need to fix the offense. Hitting coach can help, certainly. But when the season ended, I'm like, oh, they're going to fire Marcus Thames. That was the worst offense I've ever seen. And then if you look at it a little deeper, I mean, he just came in there and you watched, I watched. I don't know what he's been saying or not saying to the hitters. But man, clearly they think there's something more in there with Thames, and they're keeping him. Let's fix this offense. And if it doesn't work next year, he's definitely gone. I mean, let's be honest. There's got to be some improvement here. And finally, Sox fan Jake. What would happen if we are competitive? What would happen if we are competitive and lead the division in July? Sox fan Jake from the top rope. How about that? The first positive question and the only positive question for 2024 into 2025. As unrealistic as it might be. Jake, what would happen if the White Sox are competitive and lead the division by July? I haven't fully thought out the answer. But if you believe in miracles, then you should believe in the 2025 White Sox leading the division by July. I would love to see it. Who would be the happiest person, or certainly one of the happiest people on the entire planet if the White Sox are leading the division by July? It would be me. It would be me. Do I see it happening? No, I do not see that happening, Sox fan Jake. Do I want to see that happening? Do I want to believe in miracles? Yes. Do you believe in miracles? That's what Al Michaels famously asked at the Winter Olympics of 1980. You know what? I'll put it to you this way. If the U.S. hockey team of 1980, with all those young kids, can win a gold medal in the Winter Olympics in hockey, then yes, the 2025 White Sox can lead the division, the AL Central, where they went, I believe, 10-42 against last year, lead that division by July, and it would be the story of the year in sports. All right, so that is going to wrap things up. Thank you, everybody, for all of your questions. This was great as we close 2024 and begin 2025, a new year, a new season, new beginnings. I'm all about that. What a year we just had. Oh, what a year. But let's hope it's a happy, a healthy, and I'm going to say winning season, but many, many more wins for the White Sox in 2025. So thanks to all of you, not only for bringing questions to the podcast, but for listening to the podcast. And not just for today, but over the last 8 years, almost 1,000 episodes of the podcast. It means the world to me. And thank you, Edgar Perez, behind the scenes. And we close the pod, as we always do, by sending it to my favorite, the one and only, Hawk Harrelson. Take it away.
All right, Art Chuck, this edition of the White Sox podcast is over.